Can this EDH deck really be worth $30 and be powerful? Let's talk about that. Our commander is Shirei, Shizo's Caretaker for 4 black. It's a 2/2 spirit, and whenever a creature with power 1 or less is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step if Shirei, Shizo's Caretaker is still on the battlefield. Initially, this may not seem powerful because this is only working with power 1 or less creatures, right? Well, it turns out that Shirei's ability is on each end step, and we are getting these creatures that we put into the graveyard from the battlefield that turn. So we get a lot of value from this commander. Blood Baron, Bloodflow Connoisseur, Bloodthorn Vampire, and Carrion Feeder. We will have to sacrifice our creatures to get the most benefit out of our commander, and these are great ways to do it because they only require that we sacrifice a creature and they have no additional cost to that. Now these cards do see some +1/+1s or +2/+2s, and they can end up swinging for a nice amount of damage, but I would not risk losing our sack outlets unless the opponent is wide open or we have more than one available, and it's the right move to attack them. Lampad of Death's Vigil, Skullport Merchant, and Thoughtpicker Witch. So these cards do let us sacrifice creatures, but we do have to pay mana in addition to already sacrificing our creatures, and this can make us run out of mana very quickly. So while I don't like paying the extra mana, these cards are great for a budget deck, and they're creatures with power 1 or less, so if we do lose them and we have our commander in play, we get them back at the end step. Clattering Augur, Dust Legion Zealot, and Skyscanner. When these enter the battlefield, we draw a card, and that may seem weak, and usually it is in normal decks, but this is a deck full of value. So each turn we get them back and repeat on the next turn, over and over. So we can end up drawing 4 cards on 1 turn cycle from just one of these cards. Grim Haruspex, Midnight Reaper, Smothering Abomination. Whenever our non-token creatures die, we draw a card, or specifically with Smothering Abomination, whenever we sacrifice a creature, we draw a card. And it has, at the beginning of your upkeep, sack a creature, which doesn't hurt us at all. Since we sacrifice with our sack outlets mentioned previously, we will draw a card for each creature we're sacrificing. Plumb the Forbidden, Read the Bones, and Sign in Blood. So besides creatures, we have these 3 that can help us draw cards. Now, Plumb the Forbidden is a really sweet card, and it does require us to have creatures involved to draw, but it's still very powerful. Pretty much it says, sacrifice X creatures, draw X cards, lose X life. And Read the Bones and Sign in Blood gets us card draw for mana and loss of life. Barfinder, Pilgrim's Eye, and Skittering Surveyor. These are technically not ramping us, but I do categorize them as ways to thin our deck. We get a basic land to our hand whenever they enter the battlefield, and that's 1 less land we have to draw, and this gives us potentially more awesome spells to grab instead, and never missing a land drop is also very nice. Big Game Hunter, Butcher of Malakir, and Elvish Doomsayer. Removal in this deck can be very harsh, so I did limit it to 7, and that may seem low to you, but we can get these to be repeatable, and it gets out of hand. Big Game Hunter destroys creatures with power 4 or greater. Butcher of Malakir, whenever this or another creature dies that we control, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and Elvish Doomsayer says that when it dies, each opponent discards a card. Again, this may not seem harsh, but once you play against these types of cards, it leaves you with no creatures and no cards in hand, and that can be seen as no fun. Defile, Feed the Swarm, Infernal Grasp, and Tragic Slip. Removal in the form of non-creatures, and great ones at that. Defile is a super underrated card in mono black. We give a creature -1/-1 for each swamp we control. Feed the Swarm can target enchantments, which black does not do well at all. Infernal Grasp for 2 mana destroys any creature, and my favorite, Tragic Slip, can target a creature and it gets -1/-1 until end of turn, but if a creature died this turn, that creature gets -13, -13. Falkenrath Noble, Vindictive Vampire, and Zulaport Cutthroat. Whenever our creatures die, we get to deal target or each opponent 1 damage. This can easily be 5 damage to each opponent each player's turn, so 20 damage in 1 turn cycle. And something to note, Falkenrath Noble says whenever a creature dies, and that includes our opponent's creatures as well. Marionette Master and Weaponcraft Enthusiast. Whenever these creatures enter the battlefield, we can choose to make tokens or to give these creatures +1/+1 counters. I highly recommend we make the tokens because these are creatures with power 1 or less, and we get them back each end step with our commander, so this makes us a ton of tokens, and while we can't get the tokens back when they die, they can be used for blocking or, even better, attacking our opponents. Desecrated Tomb and Tormod the Desecrator. Whenever 1 or more creatures leave our graveyard, we make tokens, and with how Shirei is worded, this will be for each card we're bringing back at each end step. So if we sacrifice 5 creatures, and they were power 1 or less creatures, we're going to get 5 1/1 bats from Desecrated Tomb, or 5 2/2 tapped zombies from Tormod, and that gets out of hand very quickly. Dark Privilege, Mask of Avacyn, Mirror Shield, and Soul Channeling. It's important to protect our commander because Shirei is the center of everything this deck does well, so these cards are going to make it harder for our opponents to take Shirei out of the game. If you like this deck, you're going to love the this playlist right here for more budget commander decks. If you want to buy this deck, I'll have a link in the description down below. You can also help support the channel when you purchase it, and thank you to the patrons who help support this show. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.